Hello, and welcome to Athena Rising Season 2. I am Marisol Descalzo, along with Vanessa Johannes, founded and co-host the Athena Rising podcast. Season 1 featured powerhouse women and their powerful stories. Season 2 features men who are allies to women in the legal profession. Our guest today is Eugene Pettis. Eugene is the co-founder and senior partner of Haliczer, Pettis, and Schwamm, a leading personal injury and complex civil litigation firm in South Florida. Eugene represents clients in a range of complex cases, including medical malpractice, personal injury, and commercial litigation. Eugene has the historic designation of being the first African-American president of the Florida Bar. Eugene also has his own podcast, Can We Talk 360. Eugene is a powerful voice in the South Florida legal community. Welcome, Eugene, to Athena Rising. I am so glad to have you.
Thank you. It's happy to be here, Marisol.
I want to start from the beginning. I know that you grew up in South Florida and you were one of 7 kids, and you yourself have described yourself as coming from a very poor household. How did growing up in that environment shape who you are today?
You know, it's the terms we use poor today. Back when I was growing up in the 60s, the youngest of 7, it wasn't so much social economic focus as it is today. We had everything that we needed. My parents worked hard, very humble jobs. They worked hard to give us everything we needed, and on occasion, some of the things that we wanted. Everybody around us was basically in the same boat, so it wasn't so much distractions as to who was wealthy. Nobody was wealthy in the community, but everybody was. It was a strong family-oriented time, and the family brought riches that money can't buy, if you understand. I mean, we had a very strong family structure, and we were in a community of families, and the things that we enjoyed didn't cost money. It was playing outside. It was things that are free in life. So coming from a family that didn't have an abundance, it made me recognize and appreciate what I have. It gave me the edge, if you will, to want to do better and want to be better at a high, more financially independent. I think sometimes when kids are given everything, they lose the edge of going and getting their own. So we didn't have that problem. I mean, I knew I had to get a job. My parents did an amazing job of getting us through, to college. But from that point, it was on us. And you were able to define what course you wanted to take through hard work. And that's what I did. And that's what my siblings did, knowing that I couldn't come back home and just, like these kids, a lot of them are doing now, coming back home and continuing to rely on their parents for financial support. I had to make my own way.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting because, I grew up with immigrant parents, and we weren't, we had everything we needed, but not everything we wanted. Right. And so there was always, they always reinforced that we had to get an education and had to become professionals. And I worry about the future of our kids, my kids. How do I teach them that? How do I, when they really do have everything, right? And what are your thoughts on that? How do you balance that today?
My daughters are adults now. One of the things I did, and we grew up here in Fort Lauderdale, they grew up in Fort Lauderdale and Plantation. One of the things I did was not let them get isolated in the gated community that we lived in. I took them to see people less fortunate. I took them shopping to get Christmas gifts for 5 or 6 big families one Christmas, and took them with me to deliver the gifts on Christmas Eve and the day before Christmas Eve, for them to see how on Christmas Eve there are no Christmas lights in some people's homes. So there's one family who's had 5 or 6 kids, and the oldest was like 7 or 8. And I just wanted to humble them to recognize what you have is a gift. You have to work hard to maintain it. And I just think exposing them to realities, letting them know that they are privileged, and don't rely on your privilege, rely on your hard work. And we were fortunate. My oldest is an attorney in-house with Darden Restaurants. My youngest is a doctor of child psychology. with a clinic up at the National Children's Hospital in DC. They have their careers, and they're moving on with their lives. So while they were exposed to a lot, we didn't. Today's parents, kids have more toys than they can count, and nothing's valuable because they have so much. It's a little challenging for my way of looking at life, but again, generation after generation, things change. But I like keeping everybody humble, hungry, and with that edge to do better.
Well, congratulations to you. You obviously did a good job. And I'm going to take this advice and make sure my husband hears it because it is hard. My kids do have everything.
Yeah.
So you grew up in the late 60s and 70s. And even in South Florida, that was definitely a tumultuous time in the country. In Florida, I'm sure you were surrounded by temptation in your neighborhood, in your high school. And you had every excuse, and you were the baby of the family. So you had every excuse to turn into, a bad kid, or to succumb to the temptation. Instead, you became the captain of your high school basketball team. You were the founder of clubs at school. You got into University of Miami, which was very difficult.
University of Florida.
I'm sorry, I apologize. University of Florida, which was very different and very difficult to get into at that time. How did you keep yourself on the straight and narrow and away from everything that was happening at that time?
It was a tough time in the late 60s. We know our unfortunate history of the assassinations of Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy, and 63, JFK. I remember the latter ones as far as Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy. I remember the fires on Sistrunk, which was half a mile, 3/4 of a mile from my house, seeing stores ablaze. I remember seeing as a kid the aftermath of riots when police, and it was 99% white police, driving around in two in the back seat with long guns, and two, the driver, and one in the front with long guns, as signs of just intimidation. But my mother and father, particularly my mother, she was very protective of us. While I saw kids doing all sorts of stuff and wanted to go join, we had a fence around our house. And when the lights went off, we had to be not only in the yard, but in the house. She had some strict rules that we couldn't do what other people did. Now, when I rode on the bus in middle school for the first time, I was exposed to all type of kids, many of them not even alive today. Kids that ultimately went on and unfortunately had tough lives. But I give grace and blessings and thankfulness to my parents and God. I had a very unfortunate incident in sixth grade where a white teacher and a white coach took me in the clinic and beat me. I told him he beat me with a strap belt for running across the grass. I said he beat me for 100 lashes. It turned out that the way my sister found out about it, because I was afraid of even telling my parents, because I thought I would get another whipping for having done something wrong. That's what it was in the school. If you get in trouble in school, you get in trouble at home.
That's for sure.
Yeah. So it turned out that the neighbor behind the house was behind the curtain while they were beating me, and she counted 67 lashes. That turned my life in a bad way. I hated white folks because they had beat me. I was troubled through the course of the next year or two. Got into high school at Stranahan High School, and the first week of school, I got in a fight. The second week of school, I got in another fight. And Coach Anderson, I'll never forget the gentleman's name, said, "Young man, if you get in one more fight, you're going to be suspended." And it says all the prayers that my mom had sent up, the heavens opened up, and I changed. And it was radical shift. It was instantaneously. I changed, and it was not so much, Maricel, what I did. I truly believe that it was just my mom prayers were answered. And that kid who went through all of that devastating torture, because I was in the doctor's office the night it happened. I was, we had investigators from the school board taking pictures of my body, on and on and on. It was bad. Think that kid turned into who I am today is remarkable. And it's nothing that I did. It was grace through my parents' prayers and God's answering those prayers to get me where I am today.
That's an incredible story. I just cannot believe every time I hear one of those stories, how often that was happening. And how you were able actually to turn, even though that happened to you, turn that into a positive and strength at a time, because certainly when you're, not only is it terrible, it's embarrassing. I'm sure it was, and other kids knew about it, and it must have been really, really difficult for you. And just the struggle, because there was still, I'm assuming that in the 60s and 70s, there was still a lot of, segregation in South Florida.
This in 1972, 71, 72, and they had desegregated here in Broward County the schools, but the desegregation really at that point was largely bringing white teachers into the schools, the black schools. It was my neighborhood school, Sunland Park Elementary School. It was not so much taking kids. They had started busing black kids out of the community into white schools, not vice versa. So it was a year before I got bused to Rogers Middle School, but we did have white teachers and staff at Sunland Park. And, that's, the priest was calling the house and saying, please have mercy on him. His wife is dying of cancer. And my parents said, I really don't care what his issues are. He doesn't have a right to beat my child. Yeah, it was during difficult times. And when you got to Rogers, you get off the bus and people are calling you the N-word and go back and all that stuff. So it was a period where you're on the brink of just losing it. And some people did. And fortunately, I was able to get beyond that and look toward a better day. And that phase of life was behind me.
Well, it's a real testament to you, your parents, and your entire family, because you not only are you going through difficult times in the country, right? And they're busing you to schools, but all 7 of your siblings went to college and got educated.
Mom and dad saw to them that they went to college. Some got the 4-year degrees, some got 2-year degrees, but they valued education. I was the last one. I never thought I would do anything other than go to college. And how I got to University of Florida, that offered me a scholarship. I didn't want to go. I thought it was too many white students at that time. Again, society was different then. I'd been at Stranahan High School, which was a great school, 60% white, probably 40% black. A lot of friends in all sectors, Hispanic, etc. But I wanted a black HBCU experience. All of my siblings had gone to an HBCU, and I turned that scholarship down. And I was dating someone. I was going to Bethune-Cookman. I applied to all sorts of HBCUs. I decided to go to Bethune-Cookman in Daytona, literally right across the street from my aunt, which I look back now, why would I want to go to school right across the street from my aunt? But but that's where I was headed. And I went to a girlfriend's house, and there was a gentleman there. And he said, I understand you have a scholarship from the University of Florida. Why don't you want to go? I said, there's too many white students. He says, how many black students do you need? I said, I don't know. He said, there are 1,800 black students. And I was like, in my mind, I don't know 1,800 people. That's a lot of folks. He said, what's the other reason? I said, it's too big. And he said, every day you're on the campus, it gets smaller and smaller. I think you're making a mistake. I've never seen the man again in my life. That was a 2-minute interaction, and he changed the course of my life. I give speeches about God sends angels along the way to touch your life. That was an angel. He took me. I went home and said, Mom, I want to go to University of Florida. And she said, it depends on if the scholarship's available. To make a long story a little shorter, it was available. I went sight unseen on June 9th, 1978, and the rest is history. That angel took me on the course that I was supposed to be on.
Amazing, amazing. how people come into your life for specific reasons. And you initially went to University of Florida going to be a dentist, right? You were going to study to be a dentist, and then you somehow changed courses to become a lawyer. How does that happen?
Yeah, my brother had just gotten out of dental school, and he had been out of dental school, my brother Cyrus, for his 5 girls and he and I as 2 boys. And I wanted to follow my big brother's footsteps. So, you go to the first orientation, and who wants to be a doctor? In orientation freshman year, everybody wanted to be a doctor, or, a lawyer or a dentist or something like that. Well, I did it for 2 years and I was miserable. Calculus 2 and chemistry 2 taught me that wasn't my field. And I'll never forget the day where you didn't have cell phones. I had to walk back to the dorm. The phone was on the wall in the dorm. And I called Mom and said, Mom, I don't want to be a dentist. And she said, you have to make your own decision, Gene. And ultimately, I went into political science with a minor in English, focused on law. And my whole life turned around. It was, again, where I was supposed to be. You can tell when you're in a position that fits you, when everything is interesting, easy, you're engaged, you're enjoying it. And that's what happened when I went from the sciences to political science. And that's how it came about. My big brother had just gotten out of school and I wanted to be like him.
And did you go to the University of Florida for law school as well?
I did. Double gator. My wife, Pam, is a double gator, law, under finance, and law. My daughter, Chanel, is a double gator, as I mentioned a little earlier. And the younger daughter, who's a child psychologist, went to Florida undergrad and Xavier in Cincinnati for her PhD.
Oh, so you're a Gator family.
I'm a Gator fan.
I went to UF undergrad, but I went to University of Miami for law school. So in 1985, I read that your family was picked by the White House as a great American family. You were one of 9 families selected, and you all got to go to the White House and meet First Lady Nancy Reagan. So I want you to tell me about that. How do you get picked? What was it like to go to the White House in 1985? It's fascinating to hear about this.
Yeah, in 85, I started practicing law on May 1st, 85.
Okay.
I hadn't contributed a whole lot to the family. So it was really mom and dad's contributions to society and my siblings who were older than I am. We were nominated by the Urban League here of Broward County, and it went through the process and interviews and reviews of the various packages that were submitted. And we got the word. I started in May. In June, we had contact that we've been selected. They flew me, my mom and dad, because I was still, I guess, dependent upon them getting my month into my first job. And they flew us to Washington, the entire family, all my siblings and the children, the grandchildren went to Washington. It was a great experience being in the White House, in the East Room of the White House, touring the White House in more intimate fashion. Willard Scott was the MC from the old weather guy with CBS. Dad being, at that point in time, he was a maintenance worker at the post office. They sent a limousine to pick him up to go see the Postmaster General, which was a huge deal for my dad. I mean, I could see him strutting right now with pride. And truly, it was just, the blessing was they were such good parents and people. It was their reward in life. And mom gave a lot to this community, education-wise, PTA presidents, to worked in the school system. I still walk around today. My dad has been gone since 2004, and men see me. I saw a pastor not too long ago, and every time he sees me, he said, "Your dad gave me my first job." So they were just civic-minded, family value type family, and it was rewarded, and I could not be more proud because they deserved it. Yeah. And me and my siblings are the product of that type of commitment to family and community.
And being that your parents were so civic minded, and seemed to be very entrenched in the community and improving the community, did any of your siblings, or have you ever thought of being a politician or doing something for public office, a judge maybe?
Yeah, I've had my opportunities. None of us have been in public office. My sister has been city manager for decades up in the Virginia area. She's been recalled. She was retired. They brought her back in another city. And through that, she transforms communities. That's why she's been doing it for so long. Coming out of the University of Florida, I would have bet I would in the top 3 students graduating would be in politics. I loved politics at the University of Florida. I was engaged in student government, first African-American treasurer of the student body, Blue Key, Hall of Fame, all of that stuff that we had at the University of Florida. So I was very in tune. I got back, and in my 6th year of practicing, Governor Lawton Childs, the late Governor Lawton Childs, tapped me to be on the Water Management District. At that time, it was a very powerful regional board that regulated water here from Orlando, South Orlando, all the way down to the Keys. It wasn't an elected position, but it was highly political. And I was able to get in there and make some changes, even though I was the youngest person ever, the first person of color ever to be on the board. I made some changes in diversity, in inclusion. We didn't have those terms back then, but making sure that everybody had access to the contracts and the services that were being offered. From there, my career kept putting me back into a position to make change. And I believe that I've been able to make more change by not being in a political office, but being in a community position, or the professional bar president on the governing board. I didn't, it's not a political office. And for that, it's better because I can work with everybody. You don't have the Republicans, the Democrats, the independents. You do what's good. And the bar, the creed of professionalism, item number 2 in our professional creed of professionalism talks about doing public good. And that's what it's all about. I came to the point where I was asked after my bar presidency to run for attorney general for a nanosecond, probably 48 hours. I thought about it and I said no, because I don't, I see so much waste of time and waste of purpose in public office today. I've elected to spend my time trying to change the community and embolden the community from outside of the political system.
Interesting. And you have done that. And I want to, you just touched on the Florida bar. You were the first African-American president of the Florida bar. How did that make you feel? And, what impact do you think that had on other minorities who have come after you?
A good question, a big question. I told you about angels that touch you, your life. I had no interest in getting on the Board of Governors. It wasn't something that I ever thought of. The unfortunate night when Henry Latimer died, Henry Latimer was a well-regarded former judge and private attorney with Fine Jacobson, Sorch, and Nash here in Miami, and he was here in Fort Lauderdale. He was in a 1-car accident that tragically killed him. That night, I got a call from a well-known judge and said, "Gene, I got some bad news. Henry is dead." It was shocking to all of us. And she said, he was already designated to be at the next June meeting, elected as the vice president-elect. And he died in January of 2005. They said, "We need you to run for the Board of Governors." I said, okay. And I ran a 4-person race, went into a runoff, and I won. And in 2005, I was on the board, and I had been on the board for a number of years, and it gave me a chance to look and see. It just wasn't representative of who we are in the state of Florida or who we are as a profession. And I got tired of going to every year they would have a diversity symposium and they would have a great conversation, but I didn't see anything happening. after that. And we would come back the next year and have the same conversation again. So I said, I can make a difference. I can do better. We can do better. And I decided to run for the presidency. I covered the state of Florida, connected with thousands of lawyers, literally in every corner from Pensacola to, Jacksonville, all the way down to the Keys, just touching and having conversation with people. I love people. And the campaign of it was just great, connecting, because I just felt it wasn't for me. I wanted to represent the people. And I know that sounds trite in today's politics, but I wanted to know what was on their minds so I can decide what I wanted my agenda to be. And it was an honor. It was a huge honor and blessing. It was the first African-American, James Weldon Johnson, who was admitted to the bar through the admissions test, was in 1896. James Weldon Johnson is the composer of Lift Every Voice and Sing, which is the national Negro anthem. It was 116 years after he passed his bar exam before I became the first Black president of the bar. 116 years. There were dozens, probably hundreds of people that were as worthy to be president that didn't have the opportunity. And it was those shoulders that I stood on when I took oath in June of 2013 to be the president of the Florida Bar, which I thought was an immense honor and immense responsibility. And I took it seriously to make sure I was going to be an agent of change so we could do better as a profession and as the broader society.
Well, what advice or what can you give some examples of things that we all can do in our organizations to effectuate some change? Because I'm part of some organizations where, I look around and I'm the only, Hispanic and female, and it's odd because there's a lot of women, a lot of Hispanics in the practice, or, there's only one African American and me in the room. And sometimes, we talk about how can we change, but it's hard to I don't know, to change the course of things. So if you have any advice, I'd appreciate it.
Certainly. I just gave a speech on Friday before the reptile section. That's the real property probate law section of the bar, the largest section we have in the bar, 13,000+ members. They wanted me to speak on racial bias. So I spoke on racial bias. And one of the things that's critical, I think most people want to do better, want everything to be more inclusive, but you have to be focused and intentional. What do I mean by that? To look at the room and say, God, this room should be, different. There should be more representation in the room. That's step one. You recognize it. But step two is, what are you going to do about it? And you have to develop programs where you reach out and you touch someone and say, come into the room, come to our meetings. A young lady, when I spoke on Friday, she stood up and said, Mr. Pettis, I want to tell you that they welcomed me in here, and they have later, they pulled her into the infrastructure of the organization. That's intentionality. And too often we don't want to put the work in of intentionality. It requires us to be very dedicated, very focused, and very intentional on reaching people, mentoring them in, letting them see the inside of what goes on the inside, because so many rooms of the Florida Bar, in my opinion, were almost like the Wizard of Oz, behind the curtains, and only these people can be in there. The people stayed long, and it wasn't a lot of people getting to the table. That's the reason why I started the William Reece Smith Leadership Academy, to expand the table, bring more people behind the curtain, to figure out how everything is working, to network at a higher level. And you can do it in any organization. I've done it in every level I've been in, from the University of Florida as a president of the Black Student Union as a freshman, just being dogmatic and intentional about, we are going to diversify this organization, and however many we are, we're going to go out and reach people, tell them we would like them to come to our meetings, tell them what we're all about. that's the type of stuff you have to do. And every time it's done, it has worked. Are there challenges? Certainly. When people have been excluded for so long, there's a hesitancy for them to come. They don't think they're welcome. So you have to open up, be welcoming. And if you do that, I am 100% of the belief that the product that comes out is better. I tell the judges that. I think having diverse benches on our courts is important, because you get on the bench, you're, with certain level of qualifications, but you must grow because your path may have never walked through certain communities. You may not have had a lot of access with certain communities, but as a judge, you have representatives of all communities coming before you. And it's that relationship you have with your colleagues on the bench that will help grow you toward being sensitive to other people that may be different than you. It's very important that we recognize the power of coming together as one community.
That's good advice. And I think that, I think that the general message is that we have to invite people and try to get them to come on, because they're afraid. And I understand that. And you also mentioned the William Reece Smith Jr. Leadership Academy. Tell me about that. What's the mission of the academy? How does a lawyer apply to participate?
Certainly. Every year in December, applications are received. It was basically what I just said. I was on the board. I was president-elect designate. I had traveled the state, getting to being elected as president-elect. The first 6 months before you're sworn in, you're president-elect designate. In June of the following year, you are sworn in as the president-elect. So during the course of my president-elect year, one Sunday I was sitting on my couch at home, and the vision came to me. And I started with a pen and paper, finding ways to come up with a system to integrate, bring in people into our sections, the 21 sections of the bar, into our voluntary bar apparatus. And the way I wanted to do that was to teach the skills, leadership skills, organizational skills, people skills, communication skills, networking. These are certain skills that dictate success, whether it's civic success or professional success. We have to be able to communicate. We have to be able to network. We have to be able to have strategic planning skills. And I felt that not enough people were being given those skills, taught those skills. And I went around the state of Florida. I saw really fine bar associations, and I saw some that were lacking. Well, the ones that were lacking was not because they didn't want to do better. They had not been taught better. And therefore, I wanted a leadership academy that taught the essential skills that were required to be a successful person and a successful lawyer. And that's what the curriculum was built around, a one-year curriculum. At the outset, we had a northern branch and a southern branch. We are now one leadership academy, which is great. And 35 people are selected every year. To have that year of every month, there is a meeting someplace in the state, and you grow. I spoke at the Leadership Academy here in Broward County about 4 months ago, and to talk to people, white, Black, Hispanic, male, female. They talked about how amazing the experience had been of growing and networking and learning how everything worked. So it's critical that if we want to sustain our profession, you can't just have the select elites running the organization. You have to get some new blood. You have to open up the floodgates for other people to get in there, because when they do that, we're stronger. It's no question in my mind. We've had about 15 people that have gone on to be judges. We've had 2 state attorneys, Worrell up in Orlando, Orange County, and Harold Pryor here in Broward County. We're graduates. I was at an event last week where speaking at the reptile section, 3 people came up to me and said, I was in your leadership academy, and here's what I'm doing now. The stories are endless everywhere I go, of people whose lives have been shaped and pushed, higher because they were in that leadership academy. So that was the whole intent. It's a very diverse group of people, again, by intentionality. I want people to grow personally. I want them to grow professionally. I want skills to be enlarged. So they'll come out and have confidence. I've had white female write me and say, Mr. Pettis, I just got elected judge. I'd have never had the confidence to do it, but for the Leadership Academy. So it's women, it's people of color, other minorities. We have to recognize the need to lift them to that table. Some people are already by birthright at the table. Others don't have that hookup, and they need a path to the table. They deserve a path to the table that they can make a decision whether they want to do it or not.
We could all use some of those skills and some brushing up on those skills, I'll tell you. So that sounds fabulous. I like it. And I'm surprised I've never heard of it until I started researching you a little bit. So Eugene, you're involved in your church, you're involved in the community, you're a leader at your law firm, you're a lawyer, you're a father, your office, you're constantly speaking, your office is full of trophies and awards. What motivates you to keep going? Aren't you tired?
I love it. It's who I am, in all truth. It's what motivates me. I see the world and I say, we can do better. I think we can be better. And I've always seen the world and tried to improve upon our deficiencies. And that motivates me, even though it's a very small amount. You never know who that person is that you are lifting. You never know who that one individual is. So people, talk about a legacy, and I don't have a legacy. All I want on my tombstone is he tried to make the world better because he lived. I want, with all the days of my life, to do more to make our society better. And that's a broad statement. Yesterday, we had the final at my church. I started a community education alliance 10 years ago. I was at a meeting at the school board. I represented them back then. And I heard that 70% of the Black boys were not graduating from school. I was shocked. I literally was shocked. And I called the deputy superintendent. And I said, is that true, what I heard from the African-American Ben Williams, that 70% of our boys are not graduating? And he said, yeah, that's true. The deputy said, it's true. I said, how the hell do y'all sleep at night? How are you going to sleep knowing that so many of your boys are not graduating? And it took me down this path. And it was difficult getting it established. It was dealing with literacy, mentorship, and culture. Those are the three pillars. Literacy, because these kids are not reading. And if you're not able to read by the third grade, there are studies out there that you're on the pathway for criminality. And certainly if you get past that juncture, you're not equipped to be an effective contributor to the society. You have to be able to read and develop those skills. So literacy is the first undertaking. I was at the awards ceremony last night at my church to see these young kids talking about what their experiences were. This is our first camp, summer camp. It won't be our last. We're already talking last evening about getting ready for the next summer. But that's just making the community a little better. It doesn't take a lot, but it takes some commitment, somebody who wants to push it to be that change agent, because what we see in society doesn't have to be. The bad does not have to stay bad. We can do better, but people have to give a damn and want to commit to being that change agent. And that's what drives me every day I wake up.
That's amazing. Now let's talk about you as a lawyer, because not only are you a force to be reckoned with in your community, you are a skillful litigator. How did you hone your skills as a litigator? Because you never were in government. I think you were never a prosecutor, where the path that most people take. So how did you develop your skills?
my mom told me from as far back as I could remember, however, whenever I think I can go back to like 4 years old or something, she said, "You need to be a lawyer, you talk so much." And I could hear her telling me that a gazillion times. You need to be a lawyer, you talk so much. And I did everything I could to prove her wrong. As I was going to dental school, I'm not going to be a lawyer. Look at where I am. I'm that lawyer. I'm the guy who talks so much. But some of it's just God-given skills. Some of it's opportunity. I was fortunate to get a job at Conrad, Shearing James. Rex Conrad was a preeminent trial lawyer. He's long gone now, but not only did I get a job at Conrad, Shearing James in '85, but I got a job with Rex Conrad in 1985. I started May 1st, and I was in trial with Rex Conrad May 1st for 3 weeks. That's how my career started. I was in a brain damaged baby case for 3 weeks at the table with Rex Conrad. Looking at that may be the only time somebody's had on day one you're in trial on a case like that. And my career, he believed in me, he invested in me, and he pushed me. And 1 year to date, I was in trial by myself. I got my head handed to me, and it gave me that edge to never want to have that feeling again. So, sometimes you need to lose in order to recognize what it takes to win. So I just have some skills that God gave me. I think it's really critical that you're authentic in your presentation before juries. I think you need to connect with them on a personable level. It's just things that it came naturally to me. And that kind of tells you you're in the space you're supposed to be. When I love being in front of juries and trying to convince some strangers of my case, and I did it very effectively on the defense side for a long time, all in medical malpractice primarily, and general personal injury matters. And then about 20 years ago, we switched over doing both. And about 10 years ago, we went exclusive plaintiff. And I wish I'd gone exclusive plaintiff 20 years ago. I love it because it has an emotional connection. You're helping an individual, and it's not helping a big company that you're doing all this work and it's just a little less than a little pebble in the water. You do that in a person's life, it's life-changing. So I've just continued to work hard. I've continued to study, and you have to put a lot of time in. But the speech I gave on Friday, I just put hours in, because I don't take a speech just to be a speech. I think it's a moment. I think it's something that I have to leave with them that makes them more enriched because I spoke there. And the same thing with the case. I've never taken a case lightly. I put hundreds and hundreds of hours in down the stretch to get ready for trial. And I think it reflects the level of success.
How do you mentioned being authentic with the jury, but how do you connect with them? Because we can't really talk to jurors. We kind of just, we talk at them. We can't talk to them. Do you have any advice for trial lawyers on what's the best way to really just get the jury to listen to you?
I think, I think there's a lot of soft skills that are important. How they're observing you every second you're in the court. How you carry yourself, how you're interacting with the court, how you're interacting with your opponents. Are you carrying yourself in a professional manner? How you're speaking to them, how you're looking at them. I look at my juries. I talk to them in different levels of voice, very calm, looking them in their eyes. That's a connection. I speak to them I pick up on things to personalize it when you're picking a jury. But I believe there's a dynamic in how you present yourself, how you capture the room, your cadence of how you speak. I can go fast, I can go very slow. And it's just a natural, automatic natural automatic skill that I think captures the juror to listen. And I make promises to juries based on evidence. You are going to hear such and such. And you may wonder how I know that, because we've done discovery. We've done our work under oath. And what you're going to hear is such and such. And then you get to the closing. I told you what you're going to hear, and you heard it. So I'm a very thematic person. I love themes in my case. Every case has to have a theme. And the theme, I don't just pull out of thin air. It's a theme that I think touches the common folk, that they believe this was an injustice. They believe this should have been done differently. Just this morning, I just made a demand on a case, a tragic case. If it has to go to trial, it goes to trial. I would love to take the case to trial. But for, the hard ache of a person who's lost a husband, having to go through 2 years of litigation. But it's all about confidence, how you carry yourself. I could remember my mom telling me, stand tall, put your shoulders back, head up, and I could hear that again. We could have a whole podcast of all the things mom told me growing up. And she's been gone 12 years, and I still hear all of those things resonate in my head. But just standing up confident in your case, confident in the opportunity to represent your client, and putting in the time to do your best. That doesn't guarantee a win, but I guarantee you, if you have that as a habit, you're going to win a lot more than you would otherwise.
That's good advice. You also need good facts.
Yeah, good facts help. And if you don't have the good facts, have the bad damages.
I do mostly white collar criminal defense, and I'm not blessed with good facts very often, but. Okay. So Gene, you have a podcast. It's called Can We Talk 360? Why did you start the podcast? What is it about? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Certainly. It started back in May of 20, when George Floyd got killed. I was so disturbed, as was most people, of what we observed in broad daylight. And I'm a believer that so many issues we have in our society can be resolved if we ever sit down and have a conversation. That's where Can We Talk 360 came from. The 360 is an array of conversations. But when that first happened, I was the chairman of the Tower Club Board of Governors. I pulled together 2 or 3 panel discussions from business people all across the, Broward County. I remember Bertha Henry, who at that point in time was the county's administrator for many years. And white, black, male, female, we talked about these issues in our society and how we can do better, and how we must do better, that type of treatment should not be tolerated in a civilized society. And that's where it started. And then I start branching off to other issues. I mean, I've talked about critical race theory. What is it? We hear the term. I didn't know anything about it. I don't ever remember being educated on critical race theory. So, hot issues in our society, DEI, Black history, topics, when DeSantis was saying we can't talk about Black history, I had people talk about why Black history is important, and not just for Black folks, but for all people to understand, history. We learn history. We learn a lot of history in our society. Why not Black history? Given that it's had such a significant contribution to what America is, the good and the bad. I had cancer in 21, and God told me, I want you to share your journey. I started on there, Gene's healing journey. I think too often we have crises in our lives and we keep them from the public and hide them. But I believe in our crises are testimonies and stories that you can share with someone else who's going to go through it. So I put out publicly a podcast and did what I call motivational moments during the course of my treatment for another person that may have something they confront. So the last big podcast I did was a month before I went to Africa. Weeks before I went to Africa, was dealing with voting, the importance of getting out and vote with Joe Scott, who is our election supervisor here in Broward County. So I try to do topics that are meaningful. I've had one recently dealing with trafficking in the United States, and labor trafficking is 70% of trafficking. We always think of trafficking as sex trafficking. That's significant. It's like 30%, but labor trafficking is, and had an expert on that. So I try to bring conversations to the table to keep us informed and educated on topics that are relevant to our society. I wish I had more time. If I wasn't so active as a lawyer, I would do them weekly. But I enjoy doing them to bring some conversation to the table.
I listened to the one on labor trafficking actually in researching to prepare for this interview, and it was fascinating because most people you see signs everywhere about the sex trafficking, but really labor trafficking, there's so much of it.
We're all engaged. The gentleman, I remember him saying, "Do you have a cell phone, a smartphone?" They're slaves, children that are enslaved. They help put, I forgot to put how many different pieces of that phone together. So it's just an unfortunate part of the world society. And we need to be conscious to it. And those areas we can do better, we need to do better. So that's the conversation. Can we talk? I am a true believer, even in today's society, that if we can have conversations, we'll recognize there are not that many differences. We're all looking for the same things for our families. We want, a roof over their heads. We want to be able to feed them, and we want a little happiness and good health. Any race, any religion, any place in the world, that's what they want. And if we can find a way to tolerate our differences, we got a lot more common ground that we share.
Yeah. Now you mentioned Africa. So tell me, what were you doing in Africa over the summer? Was it fun?
It was vacation.
Okay.
It was all vacation. Went with two other couples, my wife and I. We were in Botswana, Zambia, and South Africa. Beautiful people. Just talking about people that have smiles on their faces in spite of. Children that have nothing. They're living in huts, but they have a smile that radiates like the sun. They're so at peace and happy with so little. It's something that if we can bottle it and bring it back to the United States, we can change our country. Very loving, polite people. So we had a meeting with one of the former Supreme Court justices in South Africa. Very interesting conversation. Where they are now, however many years since apartheid ended. I think it was 94 or 96. And when Mandela became president, the first time Black folks had an opportunity to vote, despite the fact that they were the majority in number, the Afrikaners had controlled since 1948. So that was interesting to have a conversation with him. It was interesting. We had dinner. We were traveling with three of us. Included 6 people, and one of them had a relationship with a person from the San Diego, California area, and she and her husband, she had moved out of California to South Africa and opened up a restaurant. They opened up a restaurant. He was born in South Africa. He's an Afrikaner, and I talked about this on Friday. Implicit biases. My brain shaped him even before I knew him, because he was from South Africa. He was an Afrikaner. The Afrikaners are the ones that, treated Blacks of Africa so badly for decades and decades. It turned out the guy could not have been more opposite of what my brain told me. He was Brent. He was a great gentleman. He hated that culture so much, he left. And didn't come back to right before Mandela was put in office. He did not like the policies of what the African government was doing. And it was just an example that we all have the tendencies to, have an impression before you ever meet a person. And so often our impressions are wrong. And my impression on that occasion was wrong. But South Africa in particular, around Cape Town area and on up the coast, it's probably, and this is my second time being there, but it's probably one of my top 2 most beautiful places I've ever seen in the world. It is naturally breathtaking, with mountains everywhere, with the oceans. You got the Indian and the Atlantic Oceans. It's just, there's not a bad shot when you look out. You just see mountains and water. So if it wasn't so far, I would get there more often. But if it was too close, it'll probably be crowded. So yeah, we were there. We did some cultural activities. I don't, again, some of you, who you are resonates wherever you are. And we went into the villages. I told them I didn't just want to go to safaris looking at animals. There's only so many animals, but we had like 5 safari trips, but we had 2 or 3 different trips into the villages, where my wife and I are offering scholarship, if you will, tuition for a gentleman who wants to be a border patrol. The amount of money it takes is so small to be a change agent in these people's lives. He texted me first thing this morning, George Zulu. He stayed connected, and for about 550 American dollars, this man will get a 6-month curriculum to be able to go and have a professional job.
Incredible.
And it's like, how can I not? How can I not? So again, that was the experience. It was fun. We had a great time, but at the same time, it puts you in a position to lift someone else up. And that was what I'll recall from it years from now.
That's great. So it was fun. It was vacation, but it was also community service and connection.
Yeah,
that's phenomenal. Well, the last question I'll ask Eugene is, what is the best advice you have ever received?
The best advice, and I've received a lot of advice, but what resonates to me, and I've talked about it, I've written about this before. My mom instilled in me, all things are possible if you only believe. And that belief was a faith belief, a Christian belief. I was brought up in the Baptist church all my life. New Mount Olive Baptist Church, where I still attend and general counsel for the church. But that belief system was something that she instilled in me, I instilled in us, and I believed it. And through good times and bad times, I always believed that I will prevail. I was telling someone yesterday about my cancer journey. When things were in 21 January, when things were really dark, I never thought I was going to die. I don't brag about, I hear God's voice, but I can tell you on that day when I got my diagnosis, God said, you're going to live. And I want you to be evidence of my healing powers on this earth. I never felt I was going to die. I told my wife and my partners and my nurses here at the office, I don't want to hear any more about statistics, because if it was 5%, I thought I was going to be in that 5%. That's what my mom instilled in me. All things are possible. There's no limit if you believe. And obviously, belief alone is not enough. You have to work and go get it. But everything you can accomplish. I think that in truth, my career has been evidence of that. Nothing I've gotten fell out of the tree into my lap. I've gone and gotten it. I've reached out at a time when firms were not hiring Black lawyers, these big firms. Very, very, very few. And I applied to all of them. And my friends would say, why are you applying? They're not going to hire. And I would interview on the campus. They would take me and invite me to the firms, and one after another, we love you, but we're not going to hire you type thing. And that was in 1984, 85. And I went into Martindale Hubbell and said, God, this is it. Before the bar exam, I was probably a month and a half from into the school, and I picked 10 firms. And Conrad, Shearing, James said, we would love to interview you. And that's where I was supposed to be. I was home. I was looking at Tampa, Orlando, all of these areas. And I got a job at home, 5 minutes from my parents. I was able to enjoy 20 years of stopping by the house every day, and building that relationship and attending to them in their older years. So it all works out if you believe and trust and work hard.
Great advice. Thank you so much, Gene. I've really enjoyed speaking to you, and thank you for taking the time to sit and do the podcast.
I wish you continued success in any time. It was my joy.
Thank you.
Bye.